Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into a really fascinating document from 1974. It's an address by Sun Myung Moon called Day of Resolution of Victory.
Yeah, and this is more than just a speech. It's laying out a whole worldview, really high stakes.
Definitely. It covers some unique and frankly pretty complex theological ideas about, well, the human condition, God's feelings, even resentment, and this big plan for fixing the world.
It really is quite comprehensive. It sets out the Unification Church's theology at a really key moment. We're talking about the nature of the fall, this idea of divine resentment, and then crucially, a claim of major victory in restoring things.
So our mission today for you listening is to kind of guide you through this. We want to unpack the main ideas. First, this core claim about what happened to human identity after the fall.
Right. Then there's the path needed for restoration, which sounds incredibly demanding.
And finally, these specific claims Moon was making back in the mid-70s about spiritual and even political victories already achieved.
Okay, so where do we start? Well, the foundation for everything is this idea of God's original plan. Pure goodness, that was the ideal.
No evil intended, right? Just perfection.
Exactly. The source is very clear. Evil wasn't part of the blueprint. It came from outside, specifically from Satan, the rebellious archangel, according to the text.
And then humanity made a choice, a bad one, that went against God's will.
And that choice had catastrophic consequences. That's the theological crisis we're diving into. The source uses this really vivid analogy.
The power station one.
God is the generating station, the source of everything. But because of Satan's interference in humanity's choice, our connection line, our power line, got cut.
So if the line's cut, we can't function properly. We're basically running on fumes, or maybe not running at all.
That's the idea. And the text emphasizes Satan isn't just, an opponent. He's painted as this fierce enemy who actually wrecked God's creation and cut humanity off from real divine love.
It might help to picture the before. What was his ideal unfallen state supposed to look like?
Well, if things had gone according to plan, Adam and Eve would have become like the external God. Humanity would perfectly reflect the divine.
So it wasn't just about believing in God from afar?
No, not at all. It was meant to be a constant living relationship, like a father and son, joyful, continuous. God would be the internal ancestor, Adam and Eve the external ones.
Creating this perfect structure, vertical and horizontal, for all of humankind, everything in harmony.
Right. But the fall flipped that completely upside down,
Wow.
Which brings us to maybe the most startling claim in this whole thing about human identity after the fall.
Okay, lay it on us.
The speech is blunt. It argues that because of the fall, Satan effectively took God's place within humanity. So fallen humans are, well, the incarnation of Satan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and automatically born into Satanic lineage.
Wait, incarnation of Satan, that goes way beyond original sin as just a pendency, doesn't it? That sounds like an inherited nature.
Exactly. It's not just a flaw or a weakness. It's presented as a fundamental change in who we belong to. We're born as children of God's enemy, basically.
Which puts us completely at odds with how creation was supposed to work.
Right. And because of that satanic lineage, everything, inherited relationships, culture, even how we perceive things through our senses, is considered tainted. It all needs to be like surgically cleansed or restored.
That's a really heavy starting point. And the text actually anticipates a question you might have, which I found interesting.
Which is?
Well, if Christianity teaches forgiveness, forgive 70 times 7, right? Why can't God just forgive Satan? He only messed up once, technically, at the beginning.
Yeah. The source draws a really sharp line here. God can feel pity for humans because he sees them struggling against the satanic lineage they're trapped in. Humans are seen as victims trying to get back.
But Satan, he's the source, the originator.
Precisely. He's not just someone who made a mistake. He's presented as the source of evil, the one who actively destroyed the ideal and robbed God's family. So God can't just forgive him, at least not yet.
So who can?
This is where it gets unique. The claim is that the power to ultimately deny Satan, separate from him, and maybe even eventually forgive him, rests with humanity.
With us.
Yeah. Because Satan's influence came through Adam, only fully restored human beings, Adam's descendants brought back to the ideal can deliver that final blow, that final separation, and potentially that forgiveness.
So humanity has to fix itself and then, kind of strangely, turn around and forgive the very entity that caused all the trouble in the first place. That puts a huge responsibility on people.
It really elevates the human role in restoration. We're not just waiting for grace. We're essential players in fixing the cosmic problem.
Okay, that flows right into our second section then. If we're born with this satanic blood, as the text puts it, what's the actual practical path to switch from that satanic lineage back to God's lineage?
Well, buckle up, because the path described is incredibly tough. It's called an ascetic life, constant, intense self-denial.
So think monks and extreme discipline.
Sort of, but maybe even more fundamental. Things like martyrdom and historical sacrifices were seen as symbols of this process, literally shedding the satanic blood. You have to pay indemnity, a price, for that fallen heritage.
And the self-denial, how deep does it go? Is it just about giving up certain foods or pleasures?
Oh, much deeper. It's denying the self, the physical body, reclaiming the five senses for goodness. But maybe the most difficult part for followers was the instruction to basically deny their own families, even their marriages, in God's eyes.
Deny their families. Why?
Because those relationships were formed within the fallen world, within that satanic lineage. So they're seen as elements God would grieve over. They carry the stain, essentially, and cause God's sorrow.
Wow. Asking someone to see their closest loved ones as sources of God's sadness, that would create a powerful drive for separation and change, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. And this leads to maybe the most crucial shift in perspective in the whole teaching. The main goal of all this suffering and denial isn't actually our liberation.
It's not about saving ourselves.
Not primarily. It's about liberating God's heart. The text says God's heart is bound in grief or sorrow because of thousands of years of human failure and the loss of his dream.
So the Unification Church's mission, as Moon defined it here, was first and foremost to heal God's pain.
Exactly. To clear away that divine sorrow, that's presented as the core reason for the movement's existence.
That's a really powerful reframing. We're not just asking God for help, we're actively working to relieve God's own suffering. What's the dynamic like with God during this process? If we start out as, children of the enemy, it can't be warm and fuzzy initially.
No, it's not. The text describes God as initially feeling a sense of resentment towards fallen people.
Resentment towards us.
Yes. So to ease God's heart and overcome this resentment, followers are told they have to accept all hardships, difficulties, everything, as if it's just natural. No complaining. Total obedience.
You basically have to win God over, earn that love back.
Pretty much. The follower should be like a sacrificial lamb, totally obedient even when facing death, ready to die hundreds and thousands of times for God without a word of protest. It's this voluntary, absolute suffering that's supposed to make the fallen acceptable again, winning God's sympathy and finally, his love. Obedience is the key.
Okay, this intense, arduous path sets the stage for the really big personal claims that Moon makes in the next section about his own journey and victory.
Right. He talks about his own spiritual battle, and he paints it as uniquely difficult, very isolating.
And this is where we get that truly startling claim. He says he fought the final battle with Satan and won it alone.
Yes, explicitly. He says God did not come to rescue me. He even describes God as being deliberately cold and almost cruel, leaving him totally exposed to the enemy.
Why would God do that, according to him?
The reason given is theological. Since the original Adam failed alone, the person who comes to restore that position, meaning himself, must also succeed alone without divine help.
So God would sort of test him, lift him up, promise victory.
And then, in Moon's words, drop me into the valley of death over and over again. This was apparently to ensure the victory was completely earned by human effort, not just handed down by God.
The victory's legitimacy depended on him doing it solo. He had to win and bring back the spoils before God would acknowledge it.
And this victory, this solitary spiritual triumph, combined with his experiences in Korea being rejected, feared, then eventually accepted, this forms the basis for his huge claim.
Which is?
That he succeeded where Jesus in his lifetime couldn't fully succeed.
Which was?
Clearing away the accumulated resentment of both God and Jesus. By doing this, he claims he established the necessary spiritual foundation for a restored world. And having achieved that, he felt qualified to come to America, to open the gate to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually set up specific days to mark these achievements, right?
Yeah, he mentions two, the day of celebration for victory, set up the year before, and the day of victory over resentment, established in Korea just before this speech on May 1st, 1974. These weren't just commemorative, they signified reaching a new permanent spiritual level for the whole movement.
Okay, so moving into the final section, this internal spiritual victory claimed in 1974 immediately translates into a very concrete, almost geopolitical strategy for the external world. How did he see the world at that point?
He saw it as primed, in a way. God had supposedly prepared the democratic world, particularly America, for the Unification Church's mission. But there's a twist.
What's the twist?
He also declared that established Christianity and democracy were already doomed to decay, full of corruption.
Wait, so God prepared a world that was already failing. That seems contradictory.
Well, the argument presented is that this very decay, this failure of the old systems, actually helped the Unification Church. It created a vacuum, a void that God intended for this new movement to fill.
Ah, I see. The decay was part of the preparation, and America was ground zero.
Absolutely. The U.S. was the place to open the gate to the world. And he uses this really bold analogy to frame the situation. Let's hear it. He says the Unification Church, with its new victory, is now in the position Jesus was in. Established Christianity is like the Judaism of 2,000 years ago, corrupt and rejecting the messenger. And the democratic world is like the chosen nation of that time, the stage where the spiritual battle has to be won externally.
So the UC is the new force stepping into the breach, left by the failing establishment. What was the actual plan in '74 to win over this external world?
It was pretty aggressive. He mentions making a public appearance in 1972 where he deliberately attacked Christianity as a whole.
Why attack them?
To appeal to people who were disillusioned with traditional religion, the strategy was clear. First, capture the hearts of the people, then win over the government leaders.
And he felt he was succeeding. He pointed to evidence.
Oh, definitely. He wasn't shy about claiming external successes as proof of his internal spiritual victory. He specifically mentioned winning the heart of the U.S. president at the time and getting so many proclamations from governors and mayors all over the U.S.
So tangible political recognition was seen as direct validation.
Yes. He essentially boasts that he's changing American history, world history, and predicts that soon even Congress would realize they needed him.
And the followers, the people meant to build this new world, what were they supposed to become?
They're described as something entirely new, a different species of men, a global cosmopolitan group forming a new spiritual nation that goes beyond old national loyalties.
But becoming this new species required serious commitment.
Intense commitment. He talks about followers needing incredibly hard training to keep up with his big strides.
Hard training like.
Well, he gives some pretty startling examples of the kind of obedience needed to break that old satanic conditioning. Things like practicing crawling, standing upside down. Yeah, and even becoming heavenly streakers if that's what was required. The point wasn't just physical endurance. It was about absolute obedience and also about absorbing the complex ideology, the divine principle, which he said was impossible for outsiders to grasp without this kind of total immersion.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive. The scope of what's presented in this 1974 address is just huge. These core ideas are really something else.
Yeah, the idea that humanity carries satanic blood, that restoration requires this incredibly harsh ascetic life of denying everything.
And that the ultimate point isn't even about saving yourself, but about liberating God's heart from centuries of grief. It's a profound shift.
And it all builds up to Moon's declaration in 1974. That he, personally, achieved a victory alone, doing what Jesus couldn't fully do, clearing God's resentment and paving the way for this new global spiritual order.
Which leaves you, the listener, with a really provocative thought, stemming directly from the source material. Remember, the claim is he defeated Satan alone, that God was intentionally distant, even cold and almost cruel.
Right. So what does that suggest about the role of human struggle in this particular theology, especially struggle without God's direct help?
Does it imply that the ultimate act of faith, the supreme way to restore things in this system, is precisely that solitary endurance, being that obedient lamb, willing to suffer endlessly without complaint, even without divine comfort?
Is that the only way, according to this view, to truly erase the deep-seated divine resentment built up over history?
Something to really think about, the implications of building an entire theology around the need to fix God's grief through extreme human effort and obedience.
Yeah.